Welcome everybody and good morning. This week is of course Parshat Terumah. This Shabbos is also Rosh Chodesh Adar, the first day of the month of Adar, which brings in the joyous month of Purim and remembering Haman and Amalek, who in each generation plots to annihilate the entire Jewish people, which is really what the whole festival of Purim is about. So we're going to be addressing a theme that is connected to both of them. Today's class is dedicated with a Mazel Tov to Chani and Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Kaplan on the birth of their granddaughter, Nava Avigail, Bas Shmuel Tzvi, and Mindy Jacobowitz on the 28th day of Tevis. Mazel Tov, may you raise her l'Torah, l'chuppah, l'masim tovim with the whole family, and only simcha and nachas with health and prosperity, and thank you very, very much. Also dedicated for refuah shlema, complete and speedy recovery, to Shmuel ben Bracha Tirza, and to Yosef Shloima ben Risha, la'arichis yomim v'shanim tovus. Amen. B'toich kol chayli Yisrael. Sometimes in life, and I would say probably recently even more, we find ourselves being overtaken by very intense emotions. And sometimes these emotions are so intense, they almost feel like they're like a flood. They can flood one's brain and one's heart, and even like life itself. Sometimes emotions can be so intense, it's like, how do I remain sane and normal in all of this? And people who are more sensitive and feel deeper can even be, more deep and profound. And yet we all know that our first most commandment is to live, v'chai b'hem, to live, to bring goodness into the world, to bring light into the world, to bring redemption to the world. But we don't want to shut our hearts and numb our pain and just cut out our inner rhythm, our inner music, which emotions are really the symptom of life, right? It's what we have over artificial intelligence. Like in terms of intelligence, we're not going to win the race. In terms of genius or IQ, AI has already triumphed over us. The heartbeat of the human soul is the human soul, the human heart, the human emotion, the experiential, the embodiment, the energetic of the soul inside the body. But that can sometimes be difficult. It can be challenging, especially when you're emotional and you're deep. And that's what we want to address today. And we're going to see that the answer, at least one perspective on this, I don't want to say the word answer because this is a very, deep and ongoing dilemma in life, but one of the perspectives on this is personified and embodied, and we're given direction and guidance in one word, literally one word in the Torah that's mentioned 26 times. In this week's portion mostly, and then in the next few parshas. 26 times. One word that would seem a little unfamiliar to us, but it's mentioned over and over and over again, beginning with Terumah, and then in the next few portions, but most of them are in Terumah. As an introduction, usually we extol the virtue of being normal, right? Did you ever tell somebody, be normal? Did you ever tell it to yourself? Let me try to be normal, right? Many of us put in a lot of effort, sometimes unsuccessfully, in trying to be normal, behave as normal people, at least appear, as somebody once told somebody else, at least appear to be normal. I'm not asking you to be normal, chas v'shalom, but at least try to appear. And some of us, it comes at a price. It comes at a cost. And what does even normal mean? One person normal is another person's meshuggah, another person's meshuggah is another person's normal. Right? What is even the definition of normal? It's like on the highway, I'm always driving the right pace. The guy in front of me is too slow. The guy behind me is driving like a meshuggah, but I'm always perfect on the highway. But we're going to learn today, and it's one of the worst insults you could say on somebody in Hebrew. You say he's a shaita. Right? A shaita is an imbecile, insanity, ruach shtus. You're speaking shtusim. Shtusim means stupidity, folly. But today we're going to learn that sometimes you have to actually very consciously not be normal. This is not going to be a call to arms that everybody should completely be overwhelmed by insanity, especially you don't even have to ask people to do that usually. You didn't get my humor, okay, that's fine. It's early in the morning, before your coffee, it's fine. But it's really an internal invitation to be able to reassess what normal means. Because sometimes what many of us call normal conventionally is a trap. It's a prison. So Parshas Terumah begins the story of the construction of the Mishkan, the house for God. After all the previous portions and all of the stories and narratives and all of the laws of Mishpatim we discussed last week, comes to Terumah where the Jewish people are given a mission to construct, the first time in history, a dwelling place, a sanctuary, an abode. We call it a mishkan from the word v'shachanti, place where the Creator says, I want to dwell amongst you, I want to dwell in the midst of you. And that's the opening of Terumah, and this will continue Parshas Terumah, and then Parshas Tetzaveh, and then part of Parshas Kisisa, and then all of Parsha, most of Parshas Vayakel and Pekudei. So Terumah, Tetzaveh, Kisisa, Vayakel, Pekudei, which means the last and second half, the last 5 portions and second half of the book of Shmos, the book of Exodus, all revolve around the construction and the completion of the Mishkan, of the sanctuary. There's some other stories in the middle, especially in Kisisa, the story of the golden calf, but mostly this is the pervasive theme. How was this home built? So that's the opening of Parshas Terumah. If you look in the opening of your source sheet, the first source, Hashem speaks to Moshe. This is right the opening of Terumah. And he says, Daber el b'nei Yisrael v'yikchu li Terumah me'ez kalisha she'yidvenu libay tikchu es Terumasi. Speak to the children of Yisrael, speak to the children of Israel, to the Bnei Yisrael, and let them, v'yikchu, let them take from me gifts. Let them segregate or separate part of their assets as a gift. Me'ez kalisha she'yidvenu libay tikchu es Terumasi. The gifts should only be voluntary. In other words, this is not compelled, this is not forced, this is not a forced taxation. It's only from a person who's yidvenu liba. Yidvenu liba means your heart is moving you, your heart is generous. You want to give. Any person who wants to give, man, woman, or child, later we would see that the women dedicated more generously and came before the men. In fact, they had to schlep the men to give. That's going to be later in Parshas Vayakel, Vayavoyu ha'anashim al hanashim. The women went first and the men followed them, because it's nishka past, I guess, that you know, your wife's name will be on the plaque in the entrance of the Mishkan and the husband won't be there. Well, actually, no plaques, but I'm just saying it in humor. So he says, whoever is moved, whoever wants to give, tikhu, take it from them. If they don't want to give, they don't want to give. What are you asking for? This is the gift that you should take from them. Zahav, get gold. Kesef, silver. Nachaishes, copper. Tchelis is wool that is dyed with a turquoise blue, similar to indigo. Argaman would be wool that's dyed with a purple color. Telas shani is wool yarns that are crimson, dyed with a crimson color. Sheish, fine linen. And izim, which is the hair that is from goats. Okay, va'oris elim ma'adamim, tanned ram skins of ram that are tanned. Oris tchashim, the skin of an animal called tachash. Interesting, I see Sefaria translates it as dolphin skins. I never saw that before, but interesting. Okay, because there's a big argument what tchashim are. It's an unfamiliar word. And then finally, in this context, v'atzei shittim. Atzei shittim is wood that comes from a tree called shita, or in the plural it's called shittim, which is usually translated in English as acacia wood. Atzei shittim. And then the Torah goes through another few things that they brought in order to build and maintain the Mishkan. The word atzei shittim now, wood that comes from a shita tree, which is acacia wood, is mentioned 26 times. This is the first time. But you have it another 25 times. The number 26 is also significant. It's the name of the numerology of Hashem's name. Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey add up to 26. So it's significant. And the word keeps on coming up again and again, and there's a reason for it. Because most of the Mishkan was built from this type of wood, atzei shittim. So as the parsha continues, the first and most sacred item of the Mishkan was the Aron, the holy ark in which the tablets were placed. And the Torah says, V'asu Aron atzei shittim. What was the ark built of? It was built of atzei shittim. It was built from acacia wood. You had the shulchan, the table. That's where the lechem hapanim, the showbread, was on. They would eat it every Shabbos, change it once a week. 12 loaves of bread on the shulchan. What was the shulchan made out of? Again, atzei shittim, acacia wood. The Aron, the ark, had poles, staves, badim. The shulchan had poles. When they needed to transport them, they carried them with poles. What were the poles made out of? Atzei shittim, acacia wood. The main structure of the Mishkan was called the krushim. Krushim are beams. That was basically the foundation of the entire Mishkan. You had 48 krushim, 48 beams. On the south and on the north, you had 20 on each side. And then you had on the west another 6. And then you had in the 2 corners, southwest, northwest, another 2. Altogether 48 krushim. What were these beams made up of? And the answer is, the Torah says that you should make vasises akrashim la mishkan atzei shittim oimdim. They were all made from acacia wood. Everything was atzei shittim. So this is the actual foundation that encompassed and surrounded the structure of the Mishkan. This held up the Mishkan. The tapestries were spread over them. So the roof was held up on these beams that surrounded the actual sanctuary, all made of atzei shittim. They also had brichim, which means bars, to hold the beams together. They were also made of acacia wood. You also had pillars in the Mishkan in order to hold up the masach, which was the curtain entering the Mishkan. The paroich is the curtain separating the holy from the holy of holies. What were these beams made out of? And again, of course, atzei shittim. You had altars. You had 2 altars in the Mishkan. You had an internal mizbeach and an outer mizbeach. An internal mizbeach means in the roofed part, which was called mizbeach hapnimi, mizbeach haktoris, where they burnt incense. That was made from atzei shittim, acacia wood. The outer altar on which they brought the offerings every day in the courtyard was also built from atzei shittim, all from acacia wood. And the poles, again, to transport them was all made from acacia wood. So this really means that the primary material from which much of the Mishkan was constructed, often it was also plated with gold, but that was only the cover. The actual structure itself was usually atzei shittim, acacia wood. An exception is the menorah, the candelabra, which was made from pure gold. The kiyar, the washing basin, which was made from copper. But as we could see, most of the important and central vessels and the very structure of the Mishkan is atzei shittim. The question is, what was the yichus? What was the prominence and the significance of acacia wood, that this was what was used primarily to build the home of Hashem? Now, many studies have been written over the years, especially in recent times, to identify what are these atzei shittim. Which wood exactly did they use? So usually, as I said, we translate it as acacia wood. But that itself doesn't yet give us an answer, because I don't know if you know, but how many species of acacia wood are there in the world? And the answer is close to 1,100. 1,100. It's interesting, right? We call it acacia. Which one? There's only 1,100 different types of trees. In other words, this is a very diverse family. Acacia wood is a very, very large family, Baruch Hashem, with a lot of different categories and types and species. In Australia itself, you have 300 types of acacia wood trees. Now, I don't think they went to Australia to bring the wood from the Mishkan, but the point is, there is a huge, huge, diverse pool of these types of trees. So, usually, they're under the umbrella of what is also known in Hebrew as arazim, cedar trees, and it's usually types of trees that don't produce any fruit. I mean, some of the acacia trees have what looks like small berries, but they're not edible to people. And there would be a good reason to use acacia wood from a practical point of view because of the durability. They are simply very, very durable. So acacia has proven itself to be an extremely durable wood that has a very long lifespan. It has density and its hardness make it perfect material for heavy use pieces, whether it's dining tables, whether it's dining benches, and in this case, it would be for the Mishkan, especially they would have to transport it and move it around from place to place, and you wanted it to remain pristine and beautiful and gorgeous and glamorous, even though it was plated, and mainly to remain strong and hard. So this would be an extremely, extremely good option. Some people suggest that probably they use what's called in Hebrew shita malbina. Shita is the name of the tree in Hebrew, shita, or shittim in plural. It's called shita malbina's white acacia. White acacia is a species that is very, very popular. And the reason that was suggested is because Every beam was very tall. Every beam of the Mishkan was 10 amas. 10 amas is around 15 feet. So you can't have a small tree. If you need pillars made of wood, and each one is approximately 15 feet, because 10 amas is around 15 feet, good of a take. That was the height of the pillars of the Mishkan. 10 amas, each kerish was 10 amas. So you had to have a tree that can produce those types of trunks, and the white acacia would fit that model. Some people say it was Shitas Haya'ar, which is known as the Nile acacia, acacia nilatica, I think it's called in science, nilatica. Anyway, as I told you, there's more than 1,000 types of species, and one of them was used. And the bottom line is that the Torah obviously favored especially these atzei shittim. This was used. The question we have to ask ourselves is, there are different types of trees, different types of wood. Many of them are durable, but this exclusively was chosen. Is there any deeper meaning in that? And the word is used again and again. So as always, and as we did last week when we spoke about cooking, Vayazed, Mazid, Esav, Yaakov, cooking, and then murder, intentional, unintentional, we always look, is this word ever used again in Chumash in another context? Do we ever have the word shittim? Yeah? Very good. Very good. We have a quintessential teacher here. Ah, exactly. I know. She's still a teacher. A teacher remains a teacher. It's in the bones. And the answer is, of course, we have the story, we have the name shittim in a very different context, and actually in a very tragic story. And that's much later in Chumash. It's in Parshas Balak. It's already the Jewish people have been through a lot. They have traversed the desert. And the Torah says, and you can look at it, it's your next source. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The fifth line in the Hebrew lines from your source sheet. Balak, Perek, Chafei, Pasuk, Aleph. This is Numbers chapter 25, Sefer Bamidbar, Perek, Chafei, the end of Balak. Vayeshev Yisrael Bashittim. The Jewish people dwell in a place called Shittim. Here, obviously, Shittim is not a tree. They all didn't dwell in a tree or a type of wood. Here, Shittim is a geographical location that was given this name. Why was it given this name? Is it possible? We do know that some acacia wood species grow in the wilderness. There are some. Is it possible that, or at least near the wilderness, is it possible that in this place there was a huge amount or quantity of shitta trees, acacia wood, and that's why it's called shittim, or maybe another reason, but something happens there. The nation begins having promiscuous relationships with the girls, the daughters of Moab. And then these women invite the Jewish people to start slaughtering and making sacrifices to their pagan gods. And indeed, many of the Jews fall prey and begin prostrating themselves to these gods. And here suddenly, this is a whole new plot that the daughters of Moab and the daughters of Midian, and Chazal say this was one of Bilam's ideas, was to seduce the Jewish men en masse. And this really, it wasn't just a few individuals, it captivated and affected thousands and thousands of men who were enthralled by these women from Moab and Midian, which also brought not only from adultery, it went into idolatry and paganism. All of this happens in the place called Shittim. So you say, okay, it's just a coincidence, it's just a random, there's no connection with the Mishkan, 26 times Shittim, Shittim, Shittim. But it's always curious when you see the same word and you see that Shittim is so prevalent in the Sefer Shmos, and then suddenly in Bamidbar, it becomes a place where there's a disaster. And then there's a plague that breaks out, and then Pinchas goes and kills Zimri and Cosby, and people want to kill Pinchas. I mean, it's a tragic story. This is where Shittim suddenly occupies another significant place in the stories of the Torah. It's interesting, we have it once more at the end of Maseh, when it goes through the 42 encampments. It also says that the Jewish people dwelled near the Jordan River, from a place called Beis HaYeshimis till Avel HaShittim. Once we graduate Chumash and we get into Nevi'im, in the opening of Yeshua chapter 2, you may remember the story. Yeshua sent 2 spies to scout Eretz Yisrael before the conquest. They come to Yericho, they come to a woman named Rachav. She's called Isha Zayna, whatever that means, there's different translations, and they stay in her home. And the question is, where did Yeshua send them from? So the Tanakh says, Vayishlach Yeshua benun min hashittim. He sent these 2 spies from a place called Shittim. So indeed, we open up the Medrash, and the Medrash says, of course there's a connection. Not only is there a connection, the whole reason why the Mishkan was built from Atzei Shittim is because of that story in Shittim. Now you would think, 1 second, this is 40 years apart. The Mishkan was built in the beginning of their journey in the desert, shortly after the giving of the Torah. The story at the end of Balak is already as they traverse the desert and they're about to go into Eretz Yisrael. 4 decades have passed. So what's the connection? But somehow the Medrash sees that there's a deep connection here. And let's see what the Medrash says. Your next source is Medrash Tanchuma, Parshas Terumah Tes. It's one of the famous Medrashim is known as Medrash Rabbi Tanchuma. And over there he says as follows. Mikulam loy nivchar ela hashita bilvad. From all the trees, and we're not talking about fruit trees. Obviously you're not going to use those trees for the Mishkan. But from all the cedar trees, and from all of the what's known as Hebrew Ilanei Srak, which means trees that are not used for fruits, but they're good for wood, for building, for carpentry, for construction. The Torah chose the shita, the acacia. Shenema atzei shittim. Lama kayriyasam atzei shittim. Why do they give it this name shittim? Kedei lerapois mashasidin lasis b'shittim. This is to heal what will happen one day in a place called Shittim. Shenemar vayeshev Yisrael b'shittim in Bamidbar, where they begin this promiscuous, seductive, immoral relations with the daughters of Moav. V'loi toimar ba'aron she'asa Moshe. Don't only think that this wood needed to be used for the ark that Moshe built with Betzalel. That aron was made of shittim. Ela afilu kol aron she'Yisrael oisin tzrichim litin erez shel shita boy. Any ark that a Jew builds, you have to put in some shita wood. He calls it here erez because it's part of the family of cedars. Cedars is a very, very extended family of tall, powerful trees. And acacia is one aspect of that, one branch, pun intended, of this large family. So you need to put an erez shel shita, which means you need a little bit of a shita, acacia wood. You got to put that in the aron. This is so interesting. Somehow the Medrash sees that story in Shittim as such a central story that the whole Mishkan was built from Atzei Shittim 40 years before to heal what's going to happen 40 years later. First of all, how do you heal 40 years earlier what's going to happen later? Obviously, healing works in different directions, right? Sometimes you heal retroactively, sometimes you heal in advance, sometimes you heal from the past to the future, from the future to the past. It's also interesting that the word is lerapos, to heal. There's a healing that's needed here. What's the healing that's needed? You would think it was just people get caught up with different cravings and addictions that are very powerful temptations. But he uses the word lerapos. And how does atzei shittim heal that? When you use acacia wood, how does it heal it? And he says every ark that they built had to have this. In other words, this is a very central theme. If you look in the next source, Tanchuma Terumah Yud, which is the next section in Tanchuma, he goes further. He says, let me tell you something else about atzei shittim. Shittim Heim asu shtus. The word shittim comes from the word shtus. What does shtus mean? Shtus means insanity. A shaita, right, is, as I said before, someone who's a fool, is an imbecile. There's an insanity there. We call, in Hebrew you say, atam medaber shtuyot. You know what that means? I don't know if there's a good word in English for that. Nonsense, yeah. Stupidity, rubbish, absurdity. Shtuyot v'havalim. Tafsik litnahekem mar shaita. All these words in Aramaic, we have a word shatya. Again, it's all the same word. We'll soon see how it's connected to the word shita, when you have a shita. You would think a shita is the opposite of insanity. Huh?
I use a flip phone only.
Okay.
I do not initiate a text. I will respond, but I will not initiate. And I tell everyone the shita.
B'shita. Very good. Yeah. Yes. So the Medrash says something fascinating. Heim asu shtus v'hichisuni be'egel. They committed a shtus, which means folly, and they provoked me with the calf, the golden calf. Yavoyu atzei shittim v'yichapru al shtuson. So let the atzei shittim come and atone, forgive, heal the shtus. So suddenly we realize that the atzei shittim come from the word shtus, insanity. And because when they built the golden calf, this was a moment of insanity, of shtus, heim asu shtus, so therefore the Mishkan is built from atzei shittim to heal, to forgive, to cleanse this shtus of the calf. So we have here two shtusim. We have a place called shittim, which will happen much later, when they will enter into these relations with the girls of Moav, which is a form of znus, harlotry or adultery. And then you have the shtus of the egel, which is idolatry, and in the shittim you had both, because it came from adultery, went to idolatry, and in the egel you have idolatry, building the golden calf, which also morphed into other forms of pagan behavior, as the Torah describes later in Parshat Kisisa, and two weeks from now, Terumah Tetzaveh Kisisa, and the Atzei Shittim somehow is connected to all of this. But it's interesting, because you would think if the Egel and Shittim represents Shtus, so the way to deal with that is to stay away from insanity. But here, the whole Mishkan is built from Atzei Shittim, which literally means wood of insanity. You would think you heal insanity by going away from insanity, but here, no, bring in more. Let everything be made of shittim. But if shittim comes from the word shtus, you would want to run away from it. We have an expression in Gemara, en kateger nasa saneger. The lawyer, the prosecutor doesn't become the advocate, right? In other words, don't use the prosecutor to defend you in court, because the prosecutor is getting paid to penalize you, to bring out that you're guilty, that you're not innocent. So if the kateger is going to take his job seriously, you don't want him to be the saneger. You want somebody else, right? That's the reason the Kohen Gadol didn't go in Yom Kippur into the Holy of Holies with golden garments. Gold reminds us of the golden calf. But here, the whole Mishkan is built from Atzei Shittim. When you say you want to heal from the shtus, so it's almost like you're going deeper into Shittim in order to heal you from the shtus, from insanity. But don't you heal insanity through sanity, or maybe not? So in order to understand this, we have to go a little deeper into the word shittim, into the word shtus. There's a fascinating teaching of our sages that speaks about ruach shtus, a spirit of insanity that takes over people. And let's see it in the next source. You have it also. I also took an English translation from Sefaria. This is a Gemara in Meseches Saita, Daf Gimel. You all know of the case of a woman who's called a saita. Now, the word saita comes from which word? Listen to it. Shaita, saita. Right? One is a samach, one is a shin. But shin also has a sin, which is the shin with the left, the dot on the left side. And that's like a samach, right? Shin, sin. So samach and sin are very interchangeable in the Hebrew tongue and Lashon Kodesh. Why is a saita called shaita? She may not be a fool at all. It's not about foolishness. So literally the word stiyah in Hebrew, you know what stiyah means? Listot mehaderech. Stiyah means deviation. That's what the word till today in Hebrew. Soteh. Soteh means you move away, you veer off. There's a direction, there's a trajectory, which you would say is the beaten track. It's the way to go. It's a path that's going to bring you to your goal. And then I could be stiyah. It's like if you're Friday afternoon on the 17th and you can't get to the country before Shabbos, you'll go off the beaten track and try to find some dirt roads in the Catskill Mountains that will hopefully maybe get you to your destination, or spend Shabbos in the wherever. You'll find somebody living somewhere. And so whenever I go away, I veer off, I deviate. I'm noite mehaderech, right? Vayet in Aramaic is called stiyah. I go away, I veer off the path. That's called stiyah. That's why Isha Soita is called Soita. Rashi says over there in Parshat Nasei, Tot mi darkei hatznius. She veers off the conventional way of building a relationship, which is all based on loyalty and dedication. And obviously here there is betrayal. But it's interesting. When the Torah first introduces the concept of a Soita, it uses the word sin, not samach. The word in Parshat Nasei is ish ki siste ishtoi, not with a samach, but with a sin. Saf, sin, teshei. That's what the Gemara discusses. There's a nuance there that's very interesting. It doesn't mean she went crazy. She didn't go crazy. She's not a shaita. If she's a shaita, you wouldn't even have anything to, there's no complaints here. People, are not responsible when they're in that space. But here, it's about a person who's normal, who's what we call normal in the sense that they know what they're doing and they can take responsibility for what they're doing. So why does the Torah use that word? Says the Gemara, Rish Lakish Amar Rish Lakish says, Ein Adam Oiver Aveira Elim Kain Nichnas By Ruach Shtus. I want to tell you a rule in life. No person has ever or will ever commit a transgression unless they experience temporary insanity. Now, this is quite an intense statement by Rish Lakish. Really? Yeah, he says, Ein Adam, it doesn't happen. A person will never commit a transgression unless a ruach shtus. Ruach shtus means a spirit of shtus, of folly, they call it, of craziness, of mishagas, goes into this person, like hijacks the person's brain, hijacks the soul, and that's what allows me to go down this path. How does he know this? Shenemar, ish ki siste ishtoi, tiste ksiv. You see? It doesn't say tiste with a samach, it says with a sin. Tiste from the word shaita. Something happened. It could be a very normal person, responsible person, but there was a ruach shtus. Temporary insanity, let's call it. They tell a story about somebody who was institutionalized for a long time because of these types of things. And finally the doctor said, you're good to go. So he said, people are going to see me in the street and they say, what are you doing here? You're dangerous. So the doctor says, I'll give you a note. I'll give you a note that you're a normal person and you fit into society. So now he has a note by one of the biggest doctors, psychiatric doctors in the world, who signs that he is a normal person. His name was Chaim Yankel. He comes to shul the next morning. He goes over to the Rav after davening and he says, Rebbe, shalom aleichem, aleichem shalom, du bist normal, you're normal. The rabbi says, I try to be. He says, prove it. Prove it. The rabbi's looking at him. He says, prove it. Do you have a document that proves that you're a normal person? The rabbi says, I don't. He says, I do have a document. And from that day, he's been walking around and saying, I am more normal than this famous Rav. I have a document to prove the normalcy. Right? So I have a document to prove it, to demonstrate it. So here Rish Lakish tells us, and Rish Lakish is interesting, he's the one who says it because the Gemara Bava Metzia 84 tells us that he himself went through a major transformation in his life. Major. And then Rish Lakish says, I want to tell you a rule about life. People make mistakes and people transgress, but there's always a ruach shtus that takes over. Now, what did Rish Lakish mean by this? What Rish Lakish meant was, and the word here again is shtus, deviating, veering off. What he's telling... I'm sorry, what? What's the medicine for the ruach shtus? For the ruach shtus? Oh, that's what we're going to discuss. We're going to try to discuss that. What Rish Lakish says, and the more you live life and you work on yourself, you see every day how correct Rish Lakish is. Rish Lakish says something happens before a person deviates from actions or words or thoughts that are part of the divine blueprint for life. In Hebrew, it's called Nichnas lo juk barosh. I don't know how you say that in English. What's a juk? A cockroach. So in English, it doesn't really work. You don't say a cockroach, but you say a bug, yeah. A bug went into the head. What that means is there's something that temporarily, and sometimes it's more than temporarily, detaches me from my essence, from my core. So when the Torah says, Vayeshev Yisrael bashittim vayachal ha'am liznos, they dwelled in shittim, and that's when they went into promiscuity. It's not just geography. They live in a place called shittim. It's giving us the prerequisite. How could people do this? How do people betray their marriages? How do people betray themselves? How do people betray their souls? And the answer is shittim. You're always first living in shittim. After shittim, after the shtus, the ruach shtus, now the gates of purgatory are open. And the question is how far the person is going to end up until they get back to themselves. So shittim is not just a physical, geographical location on the map. It's much more a psychological state of consciousness. I'm living in a place of shittim. And once I'm living in that place, a lot of things that I would never do if I was not living in that place can happen. It really has to do with a lot of self-respect. When you are connected to yourself, when you're anchored in your own life force and energy, you know right away, this doesn't belong to me. I'm not going down this rabbit hole. Been there, done it. And that's what Rish Lakish is saying. Been there, done it. I'm not talking abstract theology. Rish Lakish, in fact, the Gemara says, he lived the life of a gangster. He was a mafiosa guy. He was a gladiator, Chazal say. Rashi says. And what happened? The Gemara says in Bab Metzia, Rabbi Yochanan, who was considered the greatest sage of the time, the editor of Talmud Yerushalmi, was bathing in the Jordan River. I don't know if any of you were in the Jordan River, but he was bathing in the Jordan River. And the Gemara says Rabbi Yochanan was one of the most beautiful, gorgeous people alive in the generation. Rabbi Yochanan said that he had the visage of Yaakov, who had the visage of Adam. It was stunning. It was like sunlight to look at Rabbi Yochanan. And Rish Lakish saw him bathing in the Jordan River. And what does he do? He jumps into the Jordan River, and he wants to, as the Gemara says, he wants to do something very immoral, extremely immoral. And, what does it exactly mean? Rashi says Rabbi Yochanan didn't have a beard, so maybe he thought Rabbi Yochanan was a woman, or there may be other interpretations. He jumps in, and he was such a powerful person. As he jumps into the river, it was such a powerful leap. He's right near Rabbi Yochanan. Now, you would think, if you were Rabbi Yochanan, what would you do? If I was Rabbi Yochanan, I would love to call 911, but the problem is when you're bathing in the river, you usually don't have even a flip phone on you. Right? You want to call somebody, you run, you scream, but Rabbi Yochanan was a regulated person, extremely regulated. So he looks at Rish Lakish, and he actually did one of the most psychologically brilliant things in the world. He looked at him and he said, "You're a powerful person. Chelach la'oraisa. Such power belongs to Torah. Such power that you have belongs to Torah." In other words, your power can change the world, can light up the world. Those are the first words he tells him. Rish Lakish was no dummy. He looked at Rabbi Yochanan and he says, "Shufreich lenashim." Your beauty belongs to women. Which means with your beauty, you can have everybody wrapped around your finger. Yeah, Rish Lakish wasn't dumb. And Rabbi Yochanan was regulated. He didn't say, "What a bum you are. Nobody speaks to me this way." Rabbi Yochanan says to him, "You think I'm beautiful? Wait till you meet my sister." Wait till you meet my sister. And in fact, if you become a mensch, I will talk to my sister because I think you would be a good shidduch. And the unbelievable thing is, Rish Lakish gets it. He's like, OMG. Suddenly somebody saw him. Not just calling him a mafiosa, a gladiator, a bum. Somebody actually saw him. And Rish Lakish literally becomes one of the greatest sages of the day, and the brother-in-law of Rabbi Yochanan. His sister agreed to marry him. And these two people, it's known, anyone who learns the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish are brothers-in-law and friends, and he also is a student of his. And there's numerous conversations, debates, discussions of Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. They were both leading scholars and sages of the Jewish people at that time. You're talking about the 3rd or 4th century, mostly the 3rd century after the Common Era. And Rabbi Yochanan himself is the editor of Talmud Yerushalmi. When Rabbi Yochanan told him, "I'm going to speak to my sister about you, because I think you're amazing," Rabbi Rish Lakish saw this wasn't just flattery. He wasn't patronizing him, just get out of my sight and drop dead and leave. This is like, are you crazy? You're going to marry, are you crazy? I mean, what are the Shatchanim going to say in Lakewood and Muncie and Toms River and Bnei Brak? I mean, really? This is this Rabbi Yochanan's family? It's creme de la creme de la creme. Perfection with imperfection with imperfection. The most impeccable, flawless family. Sapasnisht, as they say in Yiddish. I'm not going to translate that, because in English, past. But sapasnisht. But this showed Rabbi Lakish how serious Rabbi Yochanan was. So when Rish Lakish makes that transformation, he's really summing up his life. And he's saying, let me tell you about my life. He wasn't talking about other people. He was talking from personal experience. A person could sometimes live their entire life and do great things, but they're detached. Everything, in fact, they built up was a form of numbing, of detaching themselves from themselves. In fact, if I don't know who I am, I can create an entire life, an entire career, and a very successful career. But it's really, I'm a shell of a person. Because the person who's doing all of these things is doing it from a place of disconnect. And sometimes the more disconnected I feel, the more I need to forge identities and replace this pain and numbness with becoming even more busy and more productive. What am I building? I'm building a house of cards. I'm building Purim and Ramses, which will fall apart. And that's a very, very deep question. The Ruach Shtus here doesn't mean that I'm suddenly administered into a psychiatric ward because I'm behaving like I'm a shuggan. I could be the most normal person. But there's an insanity here. There's an insanity here because I am not in touch with my music. My wife once sent me a clip from somebody, a line. What is the definition of love? Love is learning the song in somebody else's heart and singing it back to them when they have forgotten it. But to be able to do that for somebody else, you have to be able to do that for yourself. Did you learn the song in your own heart, and do you know how to sing that back to yourself when you have forgotten your own song? Then I can do that for somebody else. And that's called internal love. It's self-love in a very powerful and beautiful way. The Ruach Shtus is, I'm disconnected. I veer off. What we call a shaita, we're not here talking about the conventional shaita, somebody who's behaving in a crazy way. I may be behaving in a very, very normal and attractive way, right? In fact, I've built a way of doing it in such a sly and clever way that nobody realizes that there's something off, and even I don't realize there's something off. That's how suppressed I am, or that's how repressed I am, that's how disconnected I am. You know, the worst forms of disconnection is when you don't know you're disconnected. If I feel that I'm disconnected, there's a torture there. There's something motivating me. Get back, get back. You left home. You're lost. You're soita. You're shaita. Come back. Go back into yourself. Right? Come back home. Come back to your essence. Get back to your song. Play that song that will bring you back to yourself. Do what? You like? Yeah. Okay. You see, you got it. You got it. But if I don't even know that I have forgotten my song, if I've forgotten my song, you know how there's a song you remember, you knew that you knew, and you remember that you don't remember it, and you're like, But what happens if I forget that I forgot? And now I replace my real song with fake songs that feel good for a few minutes. That's the tragedy of Ruach Shtus. And Rabbi Rish Lakish says, why would anybody be over an Aveda? Why would anybody take their energy, their divine gift, their time, their resources, their koiches, their soul, their body, which are all sacred, divine, infinite energies, and squander it and put it even for 5 minutes into something that is actually nauseating? Like, why would I do that? You say, yeah, what's the big deal? He said, that's Ruach Shtus. Those words. What's the big deal? There's a disassociation. There's a disconnect. It's not coming because a person is, in Yiddish, it's called nervin. Nervin is nerves, but nervin is incessant mental anxiety. That's not what it's not about anxiety. Like, I can't do this, where I'm a hypochondriac and I'm neurotic about everything. We're not talking about that. It's coming from a place that's also a Ruach Shtus, right? It could morph into OCD. That's the opposite Ruach Shtus. That's the person becomes so obsessive. Again, there's no self anymore. What Rish Lakish is talking about is connections that come from a very deep, silent place of awareness, and there's a calmness there. There's a regulation there. That's how you know there's a difference between being frum and being connected to God. It's not always the same thing. Being frum could just be I have to prove myself to myself and to others, and I'm completely dysregulated, and I'm obsessive, and it ends up in a very negative relationship towards Hashem and Yiddishkeit. This is a very, very different place. You right away see, is there a bliss here? Is there a connection? Are you singing your song? And does this song speak to your soul? And nobody knows it necessarily, but you know it. Your soul knows it. And that Rish Lakish is talking about this Ruach Shtus that can really, really cause me to veer off. Not anybody else's path, but my path. That's what we speak about stiyah. I'm not going away from your path, but I'm going away from my path. It's like I eat foods that are not good for my blood type. They're not good for somebody else, this food may be incredible. Like cheesecake. For everybody, it seems wonderful. But for me, depression. I just have to know that. I come to a bris, it's beautiful. You know how they put out those cheesecakes at the bris? You know what I mean? And it looks beautiful. But I know, at least, and everybody's eating, not everybody, a lot of people are eating it. And with a coffee. And it's like messianic. But I've been there. Yeah, you agree. But I've been there. And I know that the Messiah lasts for like 6 minutes. And afterwards it's like boom. And the same is true with so many other, that's a little example, or maybe not a little example for some of us, but the same is true in so many other areas in life. There's a disconnect. And it happens often. And Rish Lakish is not saying it doesn't happen. He's just saying, but do you have the mechanism to catch yourself? To see it, to say, oh wow, I just got lost. And it's literally, you're driving. Today we have wonderful examples with whole technology. So it used to be that when you drove and you had to go to somewhere, you had to get directions. You remember those good old days where you stopped in a gas station for like 45 minutes and missed the whole wedding because you got directions, but your husband, of course, wasn't listening. So instead of right, I already know what he knows, right? So he didn't put in that right. So he didn't make that right, and therefore you ended up in Miami when the chasana was in California. You remember that wedding? Thank God, Waze and Google Maps have saved so much shalom bias arguments in the car. I thought you were listening. No, you were listening. Well, you're the man. You're supposed to. No, you're the one who thinks you know everything. So Baruch Hashem, today we have Google Maps and Waze, and those days are over. Those days are over. Only if you listen to what Waze says. But some people are chachamim. They don't listen. I know better. Don't tell me how to get to Borough Park. I know how to get to Borough Park. I've been doing this for 45 years. So we don't listen to GPS, which is God's positioning system, because I know better. Yeah. I've told some people they shouldn't have a woman's voice because men get allergic. Like, stop telling me what to do. I'm just joking. But in any case, the bottom line is, right? Sometimes I'm a little fatracht, and I didn't realize sometimes it's hard with Google Maps. You don't see that right? You make a right that's early, you make a right that's later. But what's the mile? It does recalculate. You went off, okay. So it took 2 minutes long. You're going to get back. In life, it's exactly the same thing. It's not a problem. That's what tshuva means. What does the word tshuva mean? Return. Tshuva doesn't mean repentance. Lashuv. What's lashuv? To return. Where are you returning to? You're returning to the path of your song. You're returning your song. You're returning to your music. You're returning to your soul. You're returning to yourself. Tashuv hey. Tshuva is tashuv hey. Hey are the 5 levels of the soul. Nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, yichid. In English it's called the quintessence. Quint is 5 in the Greek. Quintessence. Because the 5th level is your yichid, your core. You're coming back to all the 5 levels of your soul, all the way back to your core. So Rabbi Rish Lakish learns this all out from that word, siste ishtai, ruach shtus. But of course, he's not only seeing it in one word in the pasuk, he's really telling us the story of his life from his own experience. When Rabbi Yochanan told him, your strength belongs to Torah, what did Rish Lakish hear in that? He heard that Rabbi Yochanan was holding the song that he forgot. That's what he heard. He didn't hear a brilliant guy who was judging him and telling him, wow, you're a really sick man. You don't offer your sister, if you're a normal person, to a sick man. You want your sister to have an amazing, beautiful life. You offer your sister to the best guy around, right? That's what you all did. I know a bacher, he's amazing. That's what you do to your sister. You do for a sister. So obviously Rish Lakish saw this. Somebody saw him, but they didn't see him on the outside, saw him on the inside. Saw him beyond the temporary insanity, beyond the ruach shtus. When somebody is stuck in a ruach shtus, when I am disconnected, how do I get back? What does that look like? So you would think the way to get back is, ruach shtus means insanity. So therefore, become very rational, become very calculated. And that's what some people try to do to heal. They become extremely intellectually sane, intellectually focused, and very, very rational. Everything is calculated. But that sometimes can be another powerful trap. Comes the Torah here and says, at the calf, when they made a golden calf, it was temporary insanity. In shittim, it was temporary insanity. The Mishkan is trying to heal that. How? Atse shittim. You need shtus, you need shittim, but you need a different type of shittim. What's the type of shittim that you're looking for? You're looking for what is called shtus dikdusha, holy insanity, holy craziness. What is that supposed to look like? If it's holy, why is it crazy? Why is it insane? So let's see the next story. The next story is a story in the Gemara, a fascinating story, where one sage accused another sage of insanity. And the story turns out quite unexpected. So this is from the bottom of the page, it's four paragraphs up. Ksuvas daf yud zayin amud aleph. Tractate Ksuvas, page 17. Amru alav al Rabbi Yehuda bar Eloi shoyanoitel bat shel hados u'miraked lefnei akala v'merkalanov v'chasuda. Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Eloi, was one of the greatest Tanoim. He would go to weddings. He would take a myrtle branch, a hadas. He would dance in front of the kala. And he would exclaim, Kala Nova Chasuda, a beautiful, gracious, gorgeous Kala. Wow, interesting. Reb Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak. Some generations later, there's a man named Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yitzchak. He's one of the greatest Amoraim, one of the greatest Talmudic sages. Mirakeh Atlas, he takes it up a level. He takes 3 Hadassim to the wedding. He comes in front of the Kala with 3 Hadassim. Why 3? Rashi says, Zorik Achas Makabal Achas. He was a juggler. So he goes in front of the Kala and he's juggling 3 Hadassim. The Hadassim we use on Sukkahs. He's juggling 3 branches in front of the Kala, dancing and exclaiming, Kala Nova Chasuda. This is what he does at weddings. He's considered one of the greatest sages. Amar Reb Zera, one of the greatest sages who was a student, younger, says, Kamachsif lon sava. The old man is humiliating us all. The old man is humiliating us all. Rashi says, why? Shemezalzel bekvoid talmidei chachamim v'noyeg kalos roish bi'atzmai. This lightheadedness, in Yiddish, sepasnasht. Reb Shmuel, you represent something. This is good for the dancers. This is good for the jugglers. This you'll hire the mezamrim, the meshayrim, the kehillah band, this band. Let them juggle. Let them. You're not a clown. This is embarrassing. Zayda says he comes to weddings. He's considered the sava, meaning the old sage of the time, the gadol adar, and at tanst, and he's uninhibited, and he's jumping and whirling and swerving with his hadassim. And Reb Zayda says, this man is embarrassing us. Ki noch nafshe, when Reb Shmuel passes away, ifsik amude de nura ben didei lekula alma. They observe that there's a pillar of fire that separates him from the rest of the world. There's something at his funeral, there's a light, a fire that people experience, which allows them to see that he's experienced completely in a different realm. Ugemiru, we have a tradition, this type of fire, this type of light, you only see one in a generation or 2 in a generation. Amr Reb Zera, the same Reb Zera who said you're embarrassing us, is at the funeral. And you know what he says? He retracts everything he taught. He says, Ahanyele shutise lasava. Shutise comes from the word shoit, which is a branch. This branch that he juggled, this is what created this scene. Va'amrile shtuse lasava. And some say Reb Zera said, the shtus, the insanity, the craziness, the folly, the absurd behavior of this old man, this is a hanile. This is what's so effective. This is what created this pillar of light that puts him completely in a different category. Va'amrile shitase l'sava. And some say that he said shitase, his shita, his perspective, his way of looking at the world. This wasn't just something he did once in a generation. This was his shita. This is his way of life. Like a shita is a way of life. Why is shita and shaita from the same root? You would think it's the opposite, right? People who have a shita are considered people. But what does it mean to really have a shita? It means you have a shita, you have a certain path. You say this person has this shita. It's a certain path. So the idea of shita, shaita means that there's a conventional path, and then I can veer off to the right, I can veer off to the left, I can go up, I can go down. A shita means I develop a certain way of doing things, and it's unique, even if everybody disagrees. This man had a shait, he had a branch of a hadas. He had a shtus. It seemed very, very wild and uninhibited and completely unconventional, and it was embarrassing to some. If you were self-conscious, you would not do that. And it became his shita. Like this was integrated. It wasn't like, he drank before the wedding, he was smashed, he lost himself. Purim people do things. It's coming. Simchas Torah, you see guys drinking and they're hugging each other. I love you. I told the guy, do this on Yom Kippur. But he needs to drink. This man didn't drink. It was a shita. It was fully present. They say once in Lahavdil in the English Parliament, Winston Churchill was a little overweight. And he knew how to sleep and snore, etc. So there was a particular person in the Parliament who would give long speeches in Britain, and Churchill would sleep. So once this person finished and Churchill, woke up from his snoring fest, and he says, Mr. Churchill, must you sleep when I talk? He said, I mustn't. It's purely voluntary. Somebody once called him a drunk in the parliament. You're a drunk because he liked drinking. And he says, that's true. You're a fool. The difference is, a drunk, I sober up tomorrow. But when you're a fool, you remain a fool tomorrow too. Churchill did have a way with words. He was a smith. He was a wordsmith, they call it. Okay? So here it's interesting. His shtus became his shita. In other words, this was not temporary insanity. He knew exactly, I'm going to a wedding. This is exactly what I do. And Reb Zayda said, I used to say this was an embarrassment. I got it wrong. Obviously, this put him in a category of 1 or 2 in a generation. And the question is, what? Suddenly here we see a different type of shtus. Ahani le shtusei lesava. The same word shtus is used. Shtus, which is not complimentary. It's his abnormal... Did I just make up a word? Abnormality? There's such a word? Okay, wow. I wanted to make sure I'm not doing a shtus and making up an English word. This abnormality suddenly is considered sacred and holy. And it was at a wedding. It came out at a wedding. Precisely at a wedding it came out. This is where it came out. The shtus dikdusha came out at a wedding. In order to understand this, let's go one step further. And here we go into one of the most amazing and astounding stories in Tanakh, a debate between a husband and a wife. A very, very famous husband and a very, very famous woman. The husband's name is David HaMelech, King David. His wife's name is Michal. She comes from very prominent lineage. She's the daughter of Shaul HaMelech, the first king of Israel, the first king of the Jewish people. She's his daughter Michal. She's his youngest daughter. Shaul had a few sons and 2 daughters. The oldest daughter Meirav, the youngest daughter Michal. He also had 3 sons, 5 children, and she is the baby, the muzinik. So at her wedding there was a muzinik dance. You want to know which wedding? Yeah. Palti Ben Laish. We once spoke about. Yeah. There's a debate. Whenever there's a debate in Tanakh between a husband and a wife, you have to listen. Because there's not many, so when they are, they're really prototypes, they're archetypes. But before we see what the debate is, we have to know one amazing thing. And that is, in the entire Tanakh, we learn about men who love their wives. Not so often does it say explicitly, but it does. It says Yitzchak loved Rivka, Vayavel. It says Yaakov loved Rachel. Vayav gamas Rachel mi Leah. He loved also Rachel, which means he loved Leah, but he loved Rachel more. And we have throughout Tanakh husbands that the Torah explicitly tells us that they love their wives. We don't even have one example, and I'm not saying it didn't exist, but it's interesting that it doesn't say, telling us that the wife loved the husband. Now you would say it's automatic. If Yitzchak loved Rivka, Rivka loved Yitzchak. If Yaakov loved Rachel, Rachel loved Yaakov. But the Torah doesn't say it with one exception. And you know who that is? Michal. The only woman in the entire Tanakh where it says that she loved her husband was Michal bas Shaul. And they say, why Michal? It's a good question. But obviously the fact that it's the only place means that there was something very, very deep about Michal's connection to David. So you see Shmuel Aleph Yud Ches Perek Chaf Vatehav Michal bas Shaul as David. The only such example in the whole Tanakh. Michal loved David. Vayagidu l'Shaul. They told us to Shaul. Vayisha hadavar beinav. He liked it, and Michal married Shaul. How do we see? Why would the Tanakh say this about Michal? So later it becomes quite obvious why. Because naturally, a daughter's loyalty growing up is to her father. Especially when your father is the king. Michal betrayed that loyalty only because of David. Because Shaul didn't like David at some point. And Shaul sent messengers to seize David at night. And what did Michal do? She took David. She sent him out through the window, a side window. She told him, get out of here. She put an image of a person in the bed. They came, they see the man. She says he's very, very sick. Just leave him alone. In the meantime, he gets to escape. They come back to Shaul. They say, your son-in-law is very sick. Bring him to me sick. They pick up the blanket, and there's no man there. And Shaul asks Michal, why would you betray me this way? And she makes up a story. She's like, he wanted to kill me, whatever, I had to do it. But obviously she saves his life. So Michal really demonstrates not just dedication, but a loyalty that is very, very powerful, because her father was the active king. He wasn't a king, in reserve. King emeritus, president emeritus. He was the active king, and it was her father. So Michal had something very deep for David, which is why the next story becomes so astounding and so telling, because you're not talking about two people who didn't have a connection, who didn't have a relationship. And not only that, when David ran away, Shaul took Michal and gave her to somebody else, Palti ben Laish. We spoke about this at another shir. The Gemara says that they never got close to each other. And after David became the king, he asks if Michal could come back, and she comes back to him. And that's when this next story happens. David fights the Philistines, the Plishtim, and he liberates the Aron, the ark. This Aron that was made from acacia shittim. He liberates from the Plishtim. And he's finally bringing it back to the Jewish people. He's bringing it back to Ir David. Remember, there's no Beis HaMikdash yet. So it's going to Ir David, to the city of David. And the Tanakh in Shmuel Beis, Perek Vav, describes the parade, the procession of this Aron to Ir David. And take a look how the Tanakh describes it. Amazing words. Second to the last line in your source sheet. Shmuel Beis, Perek Vav. V'David mecharker b'chol oiz lifnei Adonai v'David chagar eifod bad. David whirled, he danced with all of his might before Hashem. David was girt with a linen ephod, with a linen apron, which was usually the garment used for prophet. Prophets would wear this. So David is wearing this very open garment, this apron, and he's mecharker. You know what the word mecharker means? It doesn't say meraked. Mecharker means what you would say, you'll forgive me, but you'll see why I'm using these words, jumping like a madman. You would say this person is really like, what is this guy on? He was whirling, he was swerving, he wasn't just dancing, people could dance as fakert, it's a whole, show game. I'm not going to do it now because I'm not a dancer. I'm not a professional dancer. There was a guy who once told the rabbi that he needs a job. He's out of a job. So the rabbi says, do you have any offers? He says, yeah, I have an offer to sing and I have an offer to dance. So the rabbi said, you should become a singer. He says, why, you heard me sing? He said, no, but I saw you dance. So David mecharker b'chol ois, with all of his might. He's not just dancing, to the beat and going around in a circle and it's beautiful. His entire might, David is completely consumed by this joy in front of Hashem. David and the whole house of Israel are bringing back the Aron, the ark, with the luchos are. It means this is an incredible moment. The Aron is coming back to the Jewish people, and they're doing it betrua, turn to the pages double-sided. They do it with blasts and a shofar's horn. V'haya aroin Hashem ba'ir David u'Michal bas Shaul nishkefa ba'ad hachaloin. V'ateiris hamelech David mefazes u'mecharke lefnei Hashem v'ativez loy beliba. As the ark enters the city of David, Michal, suddenly we hear about the queen, even though it's not really relevant to the story. She's in her house and she looks out of the window. Now, interesting. Why is this detail relevant? She looks out the window. What happened with the window with her? Remember what she used the window for? She saved him through the window. It could have just said she looked. We know she looked through the window. What if she opened the door? And what if she went outside? And what if she was watching a live stream? How she looked. Oh, there were no live streams. Okay, we'll scratch that. When it says in Tanakh she looked out the window, you need to know she looked out the window. There was a window. She saved him through the window. So this window also reminded her of their connection. And what does she see through the window? She sees that her husband is mefazes. He's leaping. He's whirling before Hashem. And she is despising it. Vatives loy. She's embarrassed. Very good. Vayives Esav es Abchara. We learned last week. Vayives Esav Abchara. Right? Esav was diminished at Abchara. Or it says Vayives Haman. And here the same word is used. It was a bizayon. Vatives loy. Vatives loy means she was ashamed of her husband. It was so demeaning. Her husband was in such vatives loy. She became like what you would call a little nauseated or a little, not a little, vatives. She was embarrassed by her husband. Ekeldik. It was ekeldik in her heart. A good Jewish wife doesn't keep her emotions to herself. for 40 years and then come out in therapy. I've been holding back because I was trying to keep the family together. She actually told him exactly what she thought. I don't know if you should always practice this at home, but you'll talk to the people close to you and figure it out. But it's much better than keeping it inside for 50 years and then you plots and you're dead. Vayoshev David levarich his beisai. David comes home to greet his household. Now beisai yizu ishta, he comes home and he's expecting, right? What are you expecting when what's your husband expect when he comes home? Shalom aleichem, what a simcha, shtetl, And David, I never knew how well you dance. You are incredible. Wow, you should go to the Olympics. That dance is so athletic. I mean, I knew you were a warrior and courageous, but David, my heart was quelling with joy. I'm just imagining a conversation that did not happen. It did not happen. This girl, this woman was quite sharp with her husband. And remember, the Torah is very explicit, the Navi. Mefazes or mecharker. Doesn't say miraket. Mefazes is like pozez, piziza. You know what that means? Completely wild, out of hand, uninhibited. We could understand what Michal is thinking. Like David, you would say he lost it. Some Mefarshim say he was whistling. This was wild. This was really crazy. So he comes home, Vatetzi Michal bas Shaul likras David. Michal comes out to meet David. And you see, every time it says her name, it also says who her father was. At this point, I know who she is. But it keeps on saying, Michal bas Shaul, Michal bas Shaul. You need to know that she was Shaul's daughter. She's very royal, exactly. She's a royal woman. She's not from peasant. She's not a peasant. Likras David, and this is what she says to him. Now this is, I'm going to tell you, if you ever think you know how to make a snidey remark and be cynical, take some lessons, okay? She doesn't say, I'm embarrassed with you. It's like worse. She's like, Ma nichbad hayoim melech Yisrael, asher nigla hayoim le'enei am ha'is avodav ki golois niglois achad harekim. How honorable and respectful for the king of the Jewish people to expose himself today in front of all the slave girls, in front of all the maidservants, as riffraff, as an empty, as a rake, as a pusta keli. The king of the Jewish people, holding up the honor of God and Torah and Judaism, the king, everyone is in awe and reverence, and you exposed yourself ka'echad harekim. You know what a rake is? A pusta ladygayer. Exactly. How do you say ladygayer in English? A ladygayer. Like a homeless, jobless doormat. Huh? A bum. What did you say? Yeah, a bum in the Bowery. Very good. And in front of everybody, you want to do this here, in front of Achad Amois, in front of everybody. Wow. And she says, Ma nichbad, this is respect. You really gave us all respect. David responds. He's not snidey, he's actually very vulnerable and very authentic. And he actually explains to her what happened. But something interesting happens. He starts talking about her father. Now, usually when people start talking about your parents, when you're having a conversation about them, we all know what the psychologist is going to tell you. Your father. But we see his answer, it's not coming from a place of, you and your father and your Zayd and your Elta Zayd, like you all have issues and get it, Because he's very sincere and vulnerable, but he speaks about her father. Vayomer David el Michal. And he starts off with two words. He says, Lifnei Hashem. This was before God. I wasn't just dancing. I was dancing before God. Asher bochar bi me'avicho mikol beisai letzavos oisi noged elam Hashem al Yisrael. Hashem chose me instead of your father and appointed me the king of the Jewish people. V'sichakti lifnei Hashem. I was quelling. I was dancing. I was laughing. I was enjoying. I was whirling, dancing away in front of Hashem. The second time, Lifnei Hashem. And then he says, Unekaloisi oid mizois. You want to know something? I would be even more lightheaded. I would be happy to dishonor myself even more. Vayisi shuffle be'enai, and be even more humble in my own eyes. V'imaimayis hasher amart imam ikaveda. the slave girls, the maid servants you're worried about, that I'm going to humiliate myself in front of these women. They're not my sisters, they're not my aunts, they're not my grandmothers. These women, maid servants, maybe some of them not even Jewish, I'm going to embarrass them. You want to know? It's with these people that I'm going to be honored. Imami kaveda. It's with these people I'm going to be honored. The end of conversation. And the Tanakh ends this chapter with a very, very sad note. Ula Michal bas Shaul hayol al yeled ad yom Mosa. And Michal bas Shaul did not have a child until she died. What's the connection? Who's talking about that? Right after with a vav. Ula Michal. It's almost like the end, and that's the end of the story. What just happened here? Maybe. It's interesting. Rashi interprets this that she already had children, because we have other Mamorei Chazal that say that she had children. In fact, she has another name in Tanakh called Egla, had a few children. So what's happening? So Rashi says it means after this story she didn't have a child. That's one interpretation. Another interpretation is till the day of her death. The day of her death she had a child. That's another interpretation, like Rachel. That's another interpretation is she didn't have children. She raised children, she didn't have children. But however you interpret it, it's obviously ambiguous. It comes right in into the story. So very, very briefly, it's this very story that describes exactly a very profound argument. And again, this is coming from a woman who loved David dearly. Nothing happened. That's exactly the point. Exactly. Sometimes it's the opposite. When you really love somebody, it's harder for you. If you don't love them so much, okay. Yeah, my husband, yeah, we know. You know, like, tell a wife, yeah, Shine, yeah, tell me another story, Shine. You know, you could just see it in the eyes, like, yeah, okay, thank you. You and Columbus discovered America and my husband. Thank you. I know this from 1492. I don't need your mices. Because of the deep relationship, the argument is not an emotional argument that he didn't like her, she didn't like him, so they fight about everything. When a husband and wife unfortunately don't like each other, everything becomes an argument. Where do we go for Pesach? Let's fight. Where do we go for Shabbos? Let's fight again. Where do we send our kids? Everything is a smoke screen, because this is very important. When there's no trust in a marriage, everything becomes a smoke screen. Should there be internet in the house? Let's fight. Because it's not about internet, it's not about Pesach, it's not about Shabbos. It's about you're triggering me, I'm triggering you. That's what has to be dealt with. Once there's trust and love, you'll figure out where to go for Pesach. I promise you, come to my hotel. Or not, whatever, I'm joking. You'll figure it out. You'll figure out where to go for Shabbos. You'll figure out where to go for Yom Tov. You'll figure out what to do with the internet in the house. Shut it down for the whole city. So we can all be spared with your shita. The point here is that David and Michal have a deep connection. So the argument is not about, I'll say anything to criticize you. You danced, not good. You didn't dance, you're so boring. Your husband dances too much, he's wild. I mean, he's drunk. He's not dancing. Why are you so inhibited? You have such a big ego. You're so self-conscious. Forget about yourself. It's like, how do you win? No. Emotionally, they were deeply connected. She looked out that window, which tells her she saved his life. And why did she save his life? Because she loved him and she knew who this person was. She knew that her father didn't see her husband the way she saw him. And that happens. The way a wife can see a husband's greatness is sometimes one in the world. Sometimes, if there's a deep relationship, a spouse can see in a spouse what their parents didn't see in them. Again, not always, but that's often the case, because a spouse can really, if there is space and there's patience and there's serenity and there's deep work, sometimes fathers and mothers are caught up in their own nachas expectations and they don't really see who their children are. And sometimes it takes a great spouse to be able to notice in a spouse who they are, see them and bring it out. Obviously, Michal saw in David what Shaul did not. And she told Shaul, you don't get David HaMelech. And she knew the truth about David HaMelech. And we all know the truth about David. David HaMelech was the fourth leg of the Merkava. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and David, the fourth leg of the chariot. David Melech Yisrael, Chai v'Kayim till today. David's book of Tehillim is not only a bestseller in the Jewish world, but it's the timeless Jewish diary. It's the timeless diary of the Jewish soul. Your grandmother in Poland and in Russia and in Galicia and in Hungary and in Lithuania, when she had a good day and a bad day, she opened a Tehillim. And this has been done since the days of David HaMelech. So David HaMelech captures the core soul, and he's called Ne'im Zmiris Yisrael. He's not only, the poet laureate of the Jewish people. He is the mouthpiece for the Jewish song, for the Jewish music. And Michal sees this. Not only that, the Gemara tells us in Maseches Eruvin that Michal was one woman in history. You know what was unique? She used to put on tefillin. Michal Bas Shaul used to put on tefillin. And there's a whole discussion, was it right, was it not right? And most of the sages completely approved, which only tells you that Michal's state of consciousness was really, really unique. And here, Michal is arguing with David HaMelech. Not to spite him. But she's saying, David, there's something very off about what just happened. You embarrassed yourself. And David disagrees with her. Yeah, he embarrassed her. He embarrassed the kingdom. He embarrassed God. He embarrassed the Jewish people. The king represents the people. You don't agree with her?
No, I see it in so many different ways.
That's fine. Yeah, that's good. That's good. We like that. My head is also spinning. It's spinning is when we.
Because I'm trying to figure out, if she loved him so much, why didn't she see that what he was doing was okay? Why did she see that?
Because she really thought it was wrong.
Yes, she really.
And we'll see in a moment why. What did you want to say? You wanted to say something?
Always they have a way how to express herself to say what is bothering me about this, not how it looks like. It's a rule about
Yeah. את יכולה לדבר בעברית. את יכולה...
כלל שאומר שאישה מפריעה לה משהו, היא לא אומרת
כן.
מה אתה, כי זה לא טוב. היא צריכה להגיד למה זה היה מפריע לה.
כן. כן.
אז אולי גם הייתה, זה לא היה טוב.
I hear. What did you want to... Somebody wanted to say something?
She couldn't match his vibration.
Yeah.
He was in a higher vibration.
That's where we come in. She could not match his vibration. And not because she didn't want to. She was raised by Shaul HaMelech, and she was anchored in that space of holiness. The Gemara says, it says in Tanakh, Shaul was 1 year old when he became a king. So the Gemara says, how do you become a king when you're one? And the Gemara says he was as pure as a 1 year old. Now that's a compliment for Shaul. Pure as a 1 year old. Wow. In other words, Shaul is called Mashiach Hashem, the appointed one. He's the first king of the Jewish people. People machap Shaul. Shaul was a very, very profound person. But Shaul had a certain mahalach. And David introduced a different trend. Shaul was such a lofty and intellectually elevated spiritual person. He followed that and he retained his composure in every situation. And he used his mind because the mind is a gift. So when God, for example, tells Shaul to kill out Shmuel says kill out all of Amalek, Shaul makes a calculation that such animals would be an amazing carbon for Hashem. He's not going to sell them on eBay. He's not raising them in his own farm. He says if the whole idea of a carbon is to transform the animal soul into the divine, is there a better and greater transformation than taking Amalek's animals and transforming it into a carbon? That's a powerful idea. And Shmuel Hanavi meets him and says, Toiv shmoya mizevach toiv lahakshiv Michal avelim. And this is the Haftarah of Parsha Zachar before Purim. It's better to listen and obey than bringing the most beautiful offering. To be obedient than bring the fat of the rams of Amalek.
Maybe that's the kesher where it says that the shakat em sisra me'achalon using the same word.
Yes.
What the kesher means.
Yes. The mother of Sisra also looks out the window. And she's waiting for Sisra to come home. Now what happens here is, Shaul represents something very, very profound. And it's here that David HaMelech tells Michal, God chose me over your father. This wasn't to shtech, to denigrate Shaul. We know that even when David had an opportunity to hurt Shaul, he didn't. He had an awe for Shaul HaMelech. But David was explaining to Michal something. And he was explaining to her what's called shtus tikdusha. Holy insanity. In which you completely lose your entire self-consciousness, including the need to hold on to anything, even something lofty, spiritual, and intellectual, what we call the death of the ego, even the spiritual ego, an full ego death. And let's see here our last source. Our last source. Second to the last source, you see Tehillim Ayin Gimel. Tehillim Ayin Gimel. The pasuk says, we're going to go for another, I know it's late, we're going to go for another 5 minutes because I want to finish the idea, so just everybody knows if you have to leave earlier, it's fine. We're going to go for another 15 minutes. Be'ezer Hashem bli neder. Tehillim Ayin Gimel. Va'ani var v'loy eda. Behemoi sayisi imach. David HaMelech says, I was a var. You know what a var is? What? Var. Ani var. Anybody knows what that means? Huh? Ignorant. I'm ignorant. Here they call it adult. You know what adult is? I never hear anybody using that word. I know a yol, the place is adult. V'ani var, I'm ignorant. V'loy eda, I know nothing. Behema isayisi imach, I'm like a behema with you. I'm a behema, I'm brutish, I'm an animal. See, Sefaria translated I'm brutish. Really, he didn't say I'm brutish. He said I'm a behema. V'ani tamid imach, and I'm always with you. Most commentators say like this, I'm a behema, I know nothing, I'm ignorant, but I'm still holding on to you. It's with a but. But that but, yet, is not what it says in the Hebrew. In the Hebrew it says, and I am with you. It doesn't say, yet I am with you. You see, the English always, they want to make it make sense. But what does it mean? He's not saying, yet I am with you. He's saying, that's why I'm with you. Now, what does this mean? So let's see here. The second to the last paragraph, Maimer Basi Legani Tovshin Yud. This is a famous Hasidic Dorsker known as Basi Legani, 1950, from the Rebbe Rayatz, the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe. Actually, a Maimer that he gave out for Shabbos to learn Yud Shvat Tovshin Yud, and that's the day he actually passed away. So he says like this, Ubiyur ha'inyan. I'm going to read fast and translate. It's deep stuff, but we're going to try to bring it home with God's grace. The light of infinity, the light of Hashem, no thought can grasp it. It's beyond the realm of comprehension. The greatest, loftiest comprehension is still a form of comprehension. There's a structure there. You're holding on to something. The word hasaga means you're retaining something. What is beyond the realm of comprehension, it is futile to use comprehension, to use the mind to grasp it, because it's completely beyond that realm. So for example, sometimes there's a deep idea. I don't understand it maybe because I'm not capable. Sometimes I need to grow capacity, or maybe I say, this is just beyond me. But that's not his point. Sometimes there's something that even the greatest mind can't comprehend because it's beyond the world of intellect. Intellect itself is a creation. Just like nobody thinks a rock can comprehend God, why do you think a mind can comprehend God? The mind is also a creation by infinity. So even the greatest, loftiest mind has realms, it has structures. It can maybe understand very lofty things, and somebody who's brilliant and AI can master tremendous knowledge, but even the deepest knowledge, it's knowledge. It has a structure, it has a way of processing life through the instruments of knowledge. So that doesn't relate to pure infinity. To give a very classic example, imagine you're trying to catch small fish in the Pacific Ocean. So you put down, there was a fisherman, he takes a net, he puts it into the Pacific Ocean. He lifts up the net and he says, there's no fish smaller than 10 inches. It was a joke, but you know what the problem was? The holes in the net were 10 inches. The instruments you use to define reality will define the reality that you discover. And you blame it on reality. Nothing to do with reality. It's the net. The tools we use to define reality, that's the reality we discover, but most of us don't have the courage to revisit the tools that we use to define reality. Because my net is just a given. But we're all using a net in life. And that net has certain holes, and that's how we filter everything through our net. So there comes a time, he says, you got to stop thinking, not because your thoughts are bad, your thoughts are amazing, but it's a net that has a certain structure, and therefore it filters reality through it. And Ein Sof, infinity, Hashem is beyond that. That takes a lot of humility. As it says in Tanya chapter 18, relative to Hashem, who's beyond seichel, beyond us, and no thought can grasp him. Everybody is like a fool. What does it mean everybody like a fool? The Tanakh says, Shlomo Melech says, Pesi yamin lechol davar. Fools believe everything. Arum, Yavin Davar La'ashurei. Wise people want to understand. If I'm a fool, I believe everything. So usually that's an insult. Because a fool believes. Don't be a fool. Don't be intellectually lazy. Use your mind. He says that's all if you're talking about something you can understand. But if you're talking about something that's beyond comprehension, to be a fool is the only way to go. That's the most intelligent thing in the world. Why? Because if you're using your mind, you're actually distancing yourself from the reality. Ukediksiv, we come back to Tehillim, Ani var v'loy eida behemoth ayisimach v'ani tamid imach. Keloymar, shebazeh shani baru behemoth ani tamid imach. David HaMelech says, you know why I'm always with you? Because I accept my ignorance. Because I could be like a behemoth. I could be with the simplicity of the animal, the behemoth. Because I don't need to understand. Because I have the ability to surrender my mind over and over and over and over again, I can always hold on to you. It's not despite the fact that I'm like a behemoth, I'm still with you. That's why I'm with you. In other words, what blocks me from the experience of infinity is that I'm trying to put it into my box. I'm trying to put it into my brain. I'm trying to fit it into my character, to my intellectualism, to my way of looking at the world, and you go crazy from it. Life is mysterious. History is mysterious. The deepest truths of life are infinite. They're completely beyond us. How do I touch that? Surrender. 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 Surrender doesn't come from weakness. If you're surrendering to a tyrant or to an emissary mishugana, that's weakness. If you're surrendering to infinity, there's nothing more intelligent. There's nothing more powerful, because it allows you to become a channel for infinity. It allows you to be in touch with your rhythm of life, which is pure, coming from Ein Sof. Leis machshava tfisa bei. No thought can grasp it. Why are you using your thoughts? It's hard for us people, especially Jews. We love using our brains. We like figuring things out. You know why? Part of it is I want to remain small, narrow, and in control. What my brain understands, I could control. It's very hard to be in a world where it's unpredictable. So I keep things in control. Even when somebody comes into the room, I want to control the conversation. I do it unconsciously, but I always want to be in control. To be in a real relationship is vulnerable. It means to be fully present. I don't know what's going to happen the next moment. I'm not going to control it. I'm not going to expect it. I'm going to be fully here right now, full presence. Try it. You'll see it's vulnerable. How do I know? Your brain is right away going to come into hijack. And what do? Don't argue. Surrender. You surrender. And you surrender with your body, not with your brain. Because if the brain says, okay, I'm going to surrender because I think it makes sense, you're done. We surrender that too. We surrender the intellectual trying to tell me that now I'm going to surrender because it wants control of the situation. And you can actually breathe into the feeling of surrender. And you'll see, following the frequency of surrender comes trust, comes love, comes faith, comes bliss. It's a different surrender. David HaMelech turns to Michal. Okay, 1 second. He says, if you want to touch the essence of Hashem, surrender your tam v'das. That's called shtus. This is good shtus. This is holy insanity. This is powerful insanity. This is where the ego, death, there's no self-consciousness. I'm not trying to protect anything. I can actually have fun. I can actually really be present with people. You're open. Your heart is open. I'm not trying to figure things out. My heart is beating. I could lose myself in the ecstasy of reality. How insulting that in Tanakh a Navi is called a Meshugana. That's so not nice. Imagine a chashiv, a rabbi comes in and you say, oh, the Meshugana is the... Come on, that's not nice. Even if you think so, say it to yourself. You know, send a clip to send a text to somebody. But the Tanakh says, Madua ba Meshugaza? We call a prophet a Meshugana. Elisha. What type of word is this? This is shtus. Remember, we called them a shaita. Suddenly we see there's a different type of shaita. There's the shaita that we say, nebach, ruach shtus. The ruach shtus that takes me away from myself. But then there's the shtus that takes me away from myself. Which self? My ego, my controlling self. Ego is easing God out, easing greatness out. What does that mean? I'm in control. Michal tells David, you're a king, you have a shtel. That's the top. It's very, very important. Respect yourself. You respect yourself. It's not you, it's not ego. You're a king. David understands what Michal says. He says, you have to understand, I was chosen over your father. Your father remained a tzaddik, but he remained stuck in his identity and therefore in his intellect. What's the power of David HaMelech? Complete surrender. Complete. Look how, you know why I dance like this? I'm not a frivolous drunk. I don't do this for a living. It's lifnei Hashem. There's moments when you're surrendering. Mordechai doesn't bow down to anybody. But Yom Kippur, we bow down 5 times. Depends who you're bowing down to. To surrender myself to any idiot is suicide. To surrender yourself to the truth, what's a greater gift? Ad lo yada, that's Purim. Purim is the victory against Amalek and Haman. Shaul kept Amalek alive. Agag, he meant well. He wanted to bring the karbanos. Purim is the defeat of Shaul, the defeat of Haman of Amalek, which comes from Mordechai HaYehudi, who doesn't bow down to anybody, but to the Ein Sof. That's why he's called Yehudi, which is Haida'ah, which is surrender, submission, Maida. It's the antithesis, it's the healing of this moment. And then the Tanakh says, Michal doesn't have a child afterwards. It's not just biologically, it's saying something existentially. What remains eternal, what creates children forever and ever and ever and ever, is this type of bittul, this type of surrender. Because then you transcend your mortality and you become a channel for infinity. And that's why at the wedding, he was behaving in this way. Why at a wedding? Why did the shtus come out of a wedding? What's a wedding? A wedding is not just 2 people coming together. With God's grace, they're going to create what we call a binyan, a ad, forever. How could 2 people create? Even the Roman Empire is not forever. Even Coca-Cola, I hate to say it, is not going to last forever. Binyan ad, there's something eternal, because there's something ein sof, there's an infinity that's created at a wedding. Ish v'isha zachu shchina shriya b'neihem. When a man and woman married, the shchina comes in and the shchina is infinite, so it goes forever. The power of intimacy is an eternal power. So how do you how do you touch that? Death of ego, bittul, complete bittul. Of course, he stood at the wedding and he danced and there was no self. How freeing, how liberating. This is how you celebrate a wedding. So Reb Zayda said, you're embarrassing us. Exactly like Michal. The word Zayra means small. Paradoxically, by holding your honor, you remain small. Because it's all in my structure. Reb Shmuel lost himself suddenly by the funeral. Reb Zayda says, oh my God. Ahani le shtusei lesava. This shtus was the best thing that ever happened to him. Look how he's inspiring the whole world. He's showing us a flame that's from a different world. Therefore, I can always be with you. I can always hold on to that frequency. It's the vibration of surrender, which is the greatest vibration in the world. It's work, because our animal consciousness is afraid of surrender. It's like, what's going to happen? And sometimes self-assertiveness is very important. You have to use your intelligence and your discernment and your character. And you have to, as we said before, respect who you really are and know your song. And Ruach Shtus takes you away from that. But the opposite of that is the opposite Shtus. When all this is coming into me, including all these flooding thoughts, the power of surrender doesn't take you away from life. It puts you into the rhythm of life. I don't have to figure it out. People sometimes think they have to figure out their kids. Good luck. The less we figure things out, the more we show up. You heard what I said? The more we figure things out, the more we remain stuck. The more or less I could figure out, I could just show up. Show up. The world is being created right now. Show up with your presence. So therefore, vani var v'lo the behemoth yisimach vani tamadimach. That's what Emunah means. Emunah doesn't mean blind faith because you're stupid. Emunah is not inferior to intellect. It's beyond. Think about things as much as you want. You could use your mind, develop your mind, challenge your mind, ask questions, but then there's a place that the mind says, sorry, I can't go through this door. It's like the holes in the net. I can't touch Ein Sof. That's where Emunah takes over. It's the gift of surrender. It's the gift of the sixth sense of the soul that when cultivated allows you to experience ultimate reality. So now when David HaMelech says, this was why I was chosen, and this is why David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayim, Michal doesn't have a child, which means when I serve Hashem only from a place of my own ego and identity and my own mind, it has its longevity, its lifespan is limited, because everything remains limited. It's when I could let go completely. You're worried about these maidservants, that they're going to embarrass me? This is my greatest respect. My greatest respect is that there's no self. That's my greatest respect. My greatest respect is not, I'm the big guy. Wow, look, you give me a standing ovation. Am I amazing? That's the burden of ego. That's the burden of selfhood that detaches me. The greatest gift is, I don't have to exist as a separate being. I'm a chaya. I don't even have to feel myself. You all know the greatest moments of bliss in life is when you stop feeling yourself. What's a healthiest body? When you don't feel your body. When you start feeling your body, it means there's pain, something is off, right? If you start feeling your head, there's a headache. If I start feeling my pinky, there's a scratch, there's a cut. Why? Because a healthy body means you don't feel it, because it's just a channel for the soul. It's not self-conscious. That's what a healthy soul is. That's why when David HaMelech wants to describe himself, if you look in the last source, Tehillim Kuf Lamed Aleph, Shir HaMalas LeDavid Hashem, Loi Gova Libi, I was never arrogant. Loi Ramu Einai, my eyes never thought I was above. Loi Hilachti B'Gdoilus U'Inflois Imenim, Loi Shivisi V'Daimamti, Nafshi Kagomol Alei Imi Kagomol Aloi Nafshi. The most powerful man in the Jewish people says, I feel like a gomel. A gomel is a suckling infant in the bosom of its mother. You know that surrender, that trust that baby has in the bosom of its mother, feeling unconditional love, and it doesn't have to figure out life, right? Do you remember those moments? Anybody has a memory? Go back to that once in a while. He says, that's what I feel like. But he's a king. Come on. You're not a baby. This was his power. I'm like a daimim. Daimim is like silent, inanimate matter. He had a lot of creativity, but in terms of surrender, he could just be a channel for the Ein Sof. And here we see an amazing thing, and that's the big question. Who is the halacha like? Is the halacha like Michal? Or the halacha is like David? Usually God told the Avos, listen to your wives. Whatever Sarah says, listen. Here David actually argues with Michal. And the Torah gives a commentary and says, and Michal's future is in jeopardy. So the Rambam, the great halachic leader of the Jewish people, gives us the verdict of the story. And this is going to be the last source. And these words of the Rambam are very powerful, because people usually see the Rambam as an ultimate rationalist, very logical, and he was a great philosopher. But here suddenly you see the other side of the Rambam. So this is Rambam Hilchos Lulav. It's in the middle of the page. You see Rambam Hilchos Lulav, mamash in the middle of the page. The Rambam says like this: the joy that a person has when he does a mitzvah and loves God who gave us the mitzvah is tremendous avodah. It's great work. Somebody who prevents themselves from this simcha, they're depriving themselves from so much. And there's negative results. Whoever is arrogant, whoever looks for glory and honor and validation in these types of moments, this person is both a sinner and a shaita, a fool. Shlomo said, in front of the king, don't try to be impressive. Somebody who knows how to humble themselves and become completely uninhibited in these moments, this is the true, great, respectable person who experiences love. David Melech Yisrael Amar, David says, I would be even more demeaning. I'm happier to be even more humble. The only true greatness and glory and honor in life is to celebrate joyously, uninhibitedly before God. Shenemar, HaMelech David mefazez u'mecharker lifnei Hashem. It's interesting, this is how he ends Hilchos Lulav, which is of course part of the Simcha of Sukkot. But it's interesting, the Rambam says, somebody who refuses to do this is a chayta and a shaita. He's a sinner and a fool. I understand why he's a sinner. Why is he a fool? He's trying to respect himself. Why is he a fool? Exactly. Because this is the greatest foolishness. The greatest foolishness is when I'm trying to be a chacham. When you're trying to be a chacham in a moment of surrender, it's the stupidest thing to do. You're touching something, you're touching the texture of infinity. When you're touching the texture of infinity, the death of the ego, the death of the need to be something is so fearful because the ego doesn't want to give up. But it's the deepest and wisest and only alternative in life. This is what puts a person always in a place of much deeper joy, of much deeper bliss. Of course, the animal inside of me says, no, you're going to lose control. Don't do this. But if you allow it to happen, and sometimes life forces us to do this. And it's a gift. It's a gift because anybody who experienced even a little bit of an ego death knows the person afterwards is a different person. The person pre-ego death is a shell of the person you could be because it's the ego that replaces life. It's only when I have an ego death that I actually become alive. As long as my ego is alive, I'm dead. When my ego dies, Michal, you can start living. You can take a deep breath and you say, okay, here I am. And God says, welcome home. Welcome home. Have a beautiful week. Thank you. Next week we're on Be'ezer Hashem, 9:30 Tuesday. Right, so Nadav and Avihu, it wasn't really a punishment. The Or HaChaim says that they wanted to kiss God, and they actually wanted they were very holy. We call it a sin because the purpose of life is to embody Hashem in this world and not to escape. Yeah, sure. Thank you for coming. Thank you.